Welcome to Everything Economics. We study microeconomics, macroeconomics, and every other type of economics.
Hello everyone, welcome back. So today we are going to study about inflation, or the name of the chapter is Measuring the Cost of Living. This is chapter 6 from the book Brief Principles of Macroeconomics, 5th edition by Gregory Menke. Alright, so what is inflation? The definition is inflation refers to a situation in which the economy's overall price level is rising. So in simple terms, it simply means the increase in price level. How much price level in the economy has increased. But here, I'm not talking about one product, I am talking about all of the products in the economy. So that simply means increase in overall price level. That's what we are talking about when we use the word inflation. So the inflation rate is the percentage change in the price level from the previous period. So for example, today is this is 2020, right? So if we calculate inflation rate of 2020, we will calculate how much prices have increased overall in the economy as compared to 2019. So it is calculated from year to year, from 2015 to 2016, how much prices were increased, from 2016 to 2017, how much prices increased, and similarly from 2019 to 2020, how much prices increased. That's how we talk about inflation when we are talking about it. And if you hear news, you will probably hear about inflation quite a lot. And whenever they are talking about inflation rate, they are basically talking about the increase in general price level in the country or the economy. So when we are talking about inflation, how do we calculate it? To calculate inflation, to calculate the overall increase in general price level, we use this concept of the consumer price index. It's an index. I will explain it to you how to calculate it in the next part, but here we just need to understand what a consumer price index is. So the consumer price index, or in short CPI, is a measure of overall cost of the goods and services bought by a typical consumer. The important thing to notice here is this one, a typical consumer. So what is a typical consumer? A typical consumer is any consumer, any person who is living in an economy, in a country. That person who purchases stuff from the market. So that is a typical consumer. So any typical consumer like you who is watching the video, like me who is delivering this lecture, who purchases stuff from the market. So when we calculate the increase in price level of all of those things that we purchase as consumers, that's inflation, and we use consumer price index to calculate this increase in the price level. So the important question that comes up is, what does a typical consumer like you and like me purchase? So to find that out, what you can do is just look around your room right now, wherever you're sitting, and you will notice quite a lot of things that you purchase in daily routine, or most of the consumers purchase in their life. You might see, for example, food, vegetables, right? So that's what you will most likely find in your house. What else? A bicycle, maybe. That's also one of the typical consumer also purchases a bicycle most of the time. Shoes, yeah, that's also most of the consumers who live in a country or who live in an economy also purchase shoes. A car, many consumers also purchase car. What's that? Gulab jamun. So that's a sweet dish, and it's a favorite of many people around here, and many people also purchase that. Coca-Cola, that's sold throughout the world, and many people consume that as well. table, chair, and books. So these are a few of the things that a typical consumer purchases. So why am I talking about all of these things? I mean, I'm talking about an increase in the general price level. So I'm not talking about only this one specific good. When I'm talking about inflation, I'm talking about all of these goods plus many more. So when a typical consumer purchases all of this stuff and many other things, and when we calculate the increase in price level in of all of those products, we find the general increase in price level, or we find the inflation rate. I will talk about how to calculate the inflation rate or the consumer price index in the next part. But here, just focus on on inflation. What is inflation and what is consumer price index? Inflation is the increase in general price level. Consumer price index is the method, is the way to find inflation. So consumer price index is a method to calculate inflation. So consumer price index, when the CPI rises, the typical family has to spend more dollars to maintain the same standard of living. So whenever there is inflation, whenever things become expensive in a country or in an economy, so to purchase the same level of things, a typical consumer has to spend more money. So for example, if I go back to the previous slide, yeah, here if you used to spend, let's say, $20 every month on food, for example, and now the price of food has increased to $25, has increased. Now you have to spend not 20 but $25. So to purchase same amount of food, you will have to spend $25 now because the price level has increased. Similarly, if you had to purchase a car, previous year, if the car, this car, if it costed like $5,000, and now this year, if the car, the same car, due to increase in price level, costs 6,000 years, you see, to get the same car, now a typical consumer has to spend more amount of dollars, more money. So that's what what we are talking about when here we say that the typical family has to spend more dollars to maintain the same standard of living. To purchase the same stuff, now a typical family or a typical consumer has to spend more amount of dollars. So the CPI is used to monitor changes in the cost of living over time. To calculate inflation, we use consumer price index, and consumer price index is used to calculate increase in the cost of living or inflation rate from one year to another. So whenever there is inflation, the cost of living increases. So whenever the price level increases, there is inflation, and whenever there is inflation, the cost of living your life increases. And this is also important to understand that although we have consumer price index, which is basically used to calculate inflation rate in the country, we also have producer price index, which informs about the price increase in raw material used by producers. So when we are talking about consumer price index, we are only talking about increase in price level of the goods and services that are mostly used by consumers and no one else. So whenever I'm talking about consumers, I'm talking about you, about me, about any other person who is living in an economy and who goes to the market and purchases stuff to live their life. But when I'm talking about producer price index, I'm just talking about producers, people who produce stuff to sell in the market. So when they produce stuff, what would they use when they produce goods and services? They use raw material. And producer price index calculates the increase in the price level of raw material used by producers to produce goods and services. So we have consumer price index, which we use to calculate inflation, and that is very relevant for the general public. Producer price index is specifically important for the business community or the producers who produce goods and services. So we have these two different kind of price indices, and I just explained producer price index so that you could understand why I'm talking about consumer price index here. I hope this is clear to you. If you have Any question regarding the consumer price index or the inflation rate, you can simply post them down in the comment section. All right, that's it for this part. I will discuss about how to calculate inflation rate using consumer price index in the next part. All right, see you guys then. Take care.